Well, hello and welcome to Nugget Live 14 at the Mansion House here. We've got this Nugget Live mansion and we welcome you all to it today. What a show we have for you and a most amazing man. And I'm sure that's why you're all here. But just to let you know, before we get there is a chat function. It is open. Please put your LinkedIn or anything you'd like to do. You never know who you're going to meet on a Nugget Live. That's absolutely for sure. Just to let you know, your microphones will be muted unless, of course, later on, perhaps you get the chance to speak and meet with Keith. And of course, it's being recorded for future use. So if that's a problem, please let us know. But here we go. We've got, social media, and we'd like a big wave. We'd like a big wave from everybody here. So David can get a little bit of a picture from all of you. That's great. Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I'm sure that we'll be sharing that with you, and you can share that with your friends later on as well. What a show we have for you. We are so very, very lucky. It's a fireside chat today, so it's going to be a little, lighter and more friendly and, gentle. So, ladies and gentlemen, what a pleasure it is to be able to introduce a man who's created joy for probably billions of children around the world. 11 billion pounds worth or dollars worth of business, of course, from one of those shows alone. Please put your hands together as we bring onto the stage right now a man who knows how to make a TV show. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Keith Chapman.
Hi, Max. I'm so excited to be here on Nugget Live. With all your listeners. It's been thrilled to be part of this.
Well, it's very good of you to come and join us, Keith. I know you're very busy. Before we get into the questions, I know that we do a podcast, and you said to me that you were lucky enough the other day just to have a look at the Monaco Grand Prix, and you had a little story about that.
Yeah, well, the Grand Prix, something that we get to see here every year. Obviously, there's 3 Grand Prix here. There's the Electric E, the classic, and then the main Grand Prix. I saw the main Grand Prix actually the other week from the yacht club, which was really cool. Saw the crash, which was exciting. Saw the processional race, which was I suppose that whoever's in pole will win the race, but they need to somehow open up the roads to let people overtake a bit more. But that's a small point, but it's a great thing to come and watch. Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, I think most of us are very jealous, obviously, to be able to go and yacht club in Monaco for the Grand Prix. That's a good start to this. We're just letting a few people in. I didn't want to miss question number 1 before we start. So Keith, your life has been incredible, but perhaps there must have been something perhaps in your childhood going back where this was all set up. Just give us a little outline of you growing up and perhaps some of those things in your life that gave us the chance for someone who can create such wonderful characters.
Right. Well, I was always drawing cartoons from a very young age. My dad was creative. He was a piano player, so I kind of got a bit of a creative gene from him. But always drawing cartoons. Loved all the cartoons on TV. Walt Disney and Hanna-Barbera and Warner Brothers, all those wonderful Looney Tunes type shows. So I was always drawing, always copying the Marvel characters. I knew from a very early age that what I wanted to do was to go to art college and end up somehow creating characters. So that was kind of almost like a set path for me. So at art college, I kind of went into advertising. They did advertising illustration course where I was. So I ended up in advertising, but that was really cool for me because that taught me how to apply certain principles of advertising to what I do now, which is looking for that USP in something, that unique selling proposition. What is the big idea? I'm always looking for that big idea, and I use those kind of rules for what I do when I'm coming up with a children's show. I'm always looking for something original, which is difficult to do. Obviously, there's so many shows out there in the world. It's hard to find something that will be original, but I'm always looking for that. And sometimes you can find ideas which have maybe been done in the past, or certain themes, but you can mix it up a bit and add a bit of originality to it. So it's not always about reinventing the wheel. It's about sort of trying to make the wheel a little bit more special, and add a little sprinkling of magic to it.
Well, just out of interest, then, going back, you mentioned Hanna-Barbera and Disney. What were your favorites?
I think the Flintstones, Tom and Jerry, all of the Disney movies I loved. I used to love Jerry Anderson's amazing puppet type shows, Thunderbirds and Joe 90 and Fireball XL5 and Stingray, all those kind of shows. Anything which had baddies in it, sort of violence, chasing, anything that was really, really fun from a young boy, looking in, really stimulated my mind. So I was spent literally all my young years underneath my dad's mum and dad's sofa, which was one of those really old-fashioned sofas, which was really high, so I could get right underneath it and play around with all these screws, and take them all off. And I think one day they actually sat on it and it collapsed. But yeah, I got a bit of a telling off for that. But I was always imagining that I was in a spaceship. So when I came back out, I was in the living room play acting, that I was on another planet or in a different world. So my mind was always kind of fizzing with ideas. So that never left me, really.
You mentioned there, you said as a young boy, obviously your job is to make sure that all children enjoy it. And I know this isn't necessarily in the question list, but while you were there and you touched on that, what were the female characters in those series that you loved as a child that inspire you today?
Well, it's funny because when there weren't many, growing up, not many female characters. And after I actually had success with Bob the Builder, a lot of the mums used to say to me in the playground. So I had three boys myself. They'd say, "Well, yeah, but there's nothing out there for girls. Why don't you do something for girls?" So I sat down specifically to try and create a girls' show, which was Fifi and the Flower Tots, which became the UK's #1 girls' show for several years, just before Peppa Pig took over. But Fifi was a wonderful show, which was done all stop frame. We made this lovely little miniature world with all these wonderful characters, the little flower characters. So that went really well. So it was nice to do something like that for a girl. And I'd always wanted a daughter, but I didn't actually get one until recently, my second marriage, and I've managed to succeed. We had a little daughter 6 years ago, Daisy. So she's wonderful. So she's inspiring me now to write new things for girls. But I think it's nice to actually do stuff as well where you've got shows for boys and girls, like Paw Patrol, for instance, that actually appeals to boys and girls. And some shows appeal to, specifically to boys, and some for girls. But it's nice to come up with stuff that both boys and girls can get a lot out of as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Now, just to let you know, Keith, later on, there's a possibility that we have some students of media and possibly animation
Cool.
And indeed the TV world. So we might get some questions. And perhaps for those of you out there watching the show, if you've got questions, just have a little think as Keith is speaking, because later on, we might put some things in the chat that we can ask Keith from you as well. So depends on the time of the show, but we'll hope we can do that. Now, Keith, you've learned from the best, and you said you started in advertising, which gave you a beautiful, if you like, vision of how the questioning should work. But then you got a lesson, I believe, from somebody that created a show that has run and run and run. So I'd like to ask you, what was it, or first of all, how did you get to join? And then what did you learn from working with Jim Henson and the Muppet Show team?
I know, yeah. So this was an amazing opportunity that came up. I saw a big advert looking for an art director to work at the Jim Henson Studios in London, in Hampstead, and I was up in Nottingham working in advertising at the time, and I thought I must go for this job, and I did. And there were quite a few people went for it. I think it was, they told me it was something like 130 people. Um, and I ended up getting this job, working with the most amazingly talented people, and I'm still friends with a lot of them now. From just brilliant people from all walks of life, producers, directors, and designers, and puppet builders. And they had this creature workshop next door, which was great because we could sort of, where we worked in the more of the TV side, we could go around the corner and go into this film world, with all these incredible characters, being stitched together, with animatronics and stuff. And I got a chance to go on the film sets to the movies that they were making. The Labyrinth with David Bowie, if you remember. They just come out of the Dark Crystal, but I saw that, which was fantastic. So it was kind of just like being back at art college for me. It was just this wonderful world where I could just be creative every day, working on, Jim's famous characters like the Muppets and Muppet Babies and Fraggle Rock, those type of shows going through. And for me, it was an eye opener and also a learning experience of how to create a show, and also learning about the licensing and the commercialization of a show. So not just make a TV show, but try and create a global brand, because I think the Muppets was the most successful show of its day. I think it was sold into every country in the world. And Jim was just literally raking in fortunes, because it was a prime time show. So it was prime time license fees. So, with what we do now, more on the preschool side, is obviously much lesser budgets, and we struggle to raise the funds to make a show. But on prime time, you tend to get proper budgets, and so Jim cracked that one, and it was brilliant to watch. So that kind of stayed with me, all that knowledge, and so whenever I went on to make a show, I wanted to do something that was became a global brand, not just a TV show that was here for one season, but to think about how do you make it, how do you get the money back to make season two, second series, third series, fourth series, which all cost millions of pounds. So the commercial side was just as interesting to me as the TV side.
Well, you've sort of jumped into a couple of questions that might come up later on, in between those ones, but just from advertising, going to work from Jim, seeing how it's done, how you can create a global brand like that. That must have been the start of perhaps where you thought about becoming a creator yourself. So how did that come about? Was that like a transition between the Muppets?
So when I was working in advertising, I was always working on my other ideas, like children's books or cartoon strips or greeting cards or anything where I could earn extra money, to supplement the advertising salary. And I had 3 boys, so I had mortgage, like everybody, they have to work, and really do get on with their own ideas at home in their spare time, weekends. Everybody, any creative person does that, in whatever field they're working in. So it's a very speculative world in coming up with ideas. And the lucky break for me was actually coming out of my house, my first apartment in London, in Wimbledon Village, coming out and seeing a digger digging up the road, big JCB, and it just suddenly struck me, this huge, great, powerful machine. But it was very dexterous. The guy was obviously really talented at picking up tiny little things with his great big shovel. And I just thought, well, that's an interesting character. If I put eyes on and a mouth on that, I could probably create a character from that. And by the time I got to work that day on the tube, I'd probably doodled a couple of extra characters who could be in the gang. And then I needed a builder, a human character to look after them. So Bob came along, who was the father figure, if you like, to these naughty kids who just happened to be sort of digging machines. And then I thought to myself, well, the biggest show out there at the time was Thomas the Tank Engine. It was a huge billion-dollar brand, which Hit Entertainment were making fortunes from. And I just thought, well, that's based on steam trains, and kids don't really see steam trains on a daily basis. So surely a show about construction, which is the biggest industry in the world, where they're seeing diggers and they're seeing construction themes going on. Their dad wallpapering every day, papering the house and digging up the patio. Those type of jobs, more domestic jobs, or even bigger jobs. Building bridges or even houses. That struck me as being surely that must be a successful idea. And I was determined to get it made. And I actually took it to Hit Entertainment, which was run by a guy called Peter Orton, this wonderful guy, fantastic salesman, who actually made the Muppets the big success that it was. And he immediately saw the potential of Bob the Builder and picked it up, optioned it literally in the office, wouldn't let me leave until I'd signed. I knew that it was going to have a good chance of success. And then when he phoned me from Cannes, from the TV festival down here that they sell the shows in, he managed to get a commission from the BBC. He phoned me at home, and I just sort of, I had a tear in my eye, I must admit, which I thought, oh, wow, it's going to be on the BBC. It's going to be stop frame. It's going to be this incredible show. So that was really an exciting day. And started off with 13 episodes and went from there. I think they ran about 18 different series of Bob. It became the #1 preschool show in the world, overtook Thomas for a bit. Within a couple of years, it was very quick. It was #1. It got to #1 in the charts. Christmas year 2000. It was the biggest selling single. Beat Westlife to the #1 Christmas single, which was a great thing to see. All the newspapers picked up the story, and they were running with that funny story of, can Bob beat Westlife to #1? And of course he did. It was this big success. And then he went on to have a couple of more #1s. He actually was involved in 3 #1s, which not many people know about. There was the Mambo #5 remix, which was the second #1 a couple of years later. And then there was a third #1 that he was involved in, which was the Peter Kay animated all-star band, which we produced when I had my company. We had Peter Kay, the famous comedian, was doing a voice for one of our characters, one of our shows, Rory the racing car. And Peter had this brilliant idea of having all these wonderful characters, British characters from the last 25 years, animation characters, all come together and do a sort of like a Live Aid type show for children, BBC's Children in Need. And we animated it, and it was a wonderful piece of work. You can Google it; it's so good. And that got to #1 as well. And it started off with Bob, like literally in a studio with Postman Pat, doing a sort of Live Aid duet, and it went on from there with all these wonderful songs from the Beatles and Michael Jackson and etc.
So Keith, were all the characters yours in that, or is it there was a mix in that, wasn't there? That
was a mix of all the historical favorite characters. Even Thunderbirds were in it. Teletubbies made an appearance. SpongeBob. You can see it. It's so good. Going way back to when we were kids. I mean, some of the very early shows. They literally. The girls who did all the research actually had to go out and find all these characters. Some of them were in suitcases under people's beds, that had never been dusted down. They had to get them out and, reanimate them, which was wonderful.
Well, it sounds wonderful, and you sort of got to my next question there, because the questions really were the next question was, what changes did Bob bring to your life, and how did you end up with a massive number one in the charts? Well, we know now how you ended up with three massive number ones in the charts. But just briefly, because there is another little bit to life that many people in business get to after this. But just before we get there, what changes to you personally did having the massive success of Bob the Builder personally do for you?
Um, well, I suppose the biggest change was that I didn't have to keep paying off £50 a month on my credit card, which I had been doing up to that point and was racking up huge debt. So the fact that you could actually clear that at the end of every month was massive. I just remember that one thing. And then eventually paying the mortgage off, that was another big sort of milestone. And things like that, being able to go and buy something that you wanted, not worry about it, because obviously the part of the success is that I'm sharing in that back end, success of the merchandise as part of the model, if you like, that I sign up to when I option, when they option my ideas and I assign the rights to those IPs. I'm taking, future profit participation. So that kind of is how I live, and what sustains me, is coming up with stuff that I can share in that success. So there are people out there obviously making huge profits, but that's fine. I'm comfortable with that. They're the ones who put their money where their mouth is, and they've taken the risk. So they should, obviously take the lion's share of everything. And I'm very comfortable with my little back end.
Well, Keith, I think many people have a few. I'm sure there's going to be some questions around those later on, or certainly we can expand on it. But it is fair to say that, I'd say in every, but in most certainly successful businesses, the success story has troubles and hardships along the way. And that's something that allows business people or new people into an industry to build the resilience that they need to build a future success again, or indeed further their success. But like many businesses, you personally suffered bankruptcy. And how did that feel? And without going too deep into this, because everyone's here for a light fireside chat,
sure,
what happened and
sure.
how did you get out of it?
Well, we were flying. We had a great company. We had these wonderful shows, Fifi and the Flower Tots, Rory the Racing Car, which kicked off as the fastest growing boys preschool show, and then we took on two new shows, Rah Rah the Noisy Lion, and Little Charlie Bear, which actually were shows that had come from outside creators, other studios, but they hadn't been able to get them away, and we sort of took them on board, if you like, became the producers of those shows, and then funded them. And we got involved, and there was huge, millions of pounds worth of investment, but literally bad timing, because it was when the world fell off a cliff. If you remember, back in 2008, 2009, all the banks went bankrupt in America. It all filtered across, and everybody started going bankrupt. Woolworths went overnight. That accounted for about 20% of our toy business. And then it just kept going. And I think the banks panicked, and they started calling in their loans, and we had an overdraft, obviously, to keep these shows funded, with our bank. And of course, we tried to restructure it. We went down to a skeleton staff, but it wasn't enough. We just couldn't quite keep our head above water. The income coming in from the existing shows just wasn't enough, because people had stopped buying toys. Everybody was really hard up. Their mortgages had shot up to ridiculous amounts. So everybody tightened their belts, and they weren't spending. And of course, there was no real money coming in on the merchandise, but the outgoings were ridiculous, because we had two brand new shows costing millions, with 80 odd people on the payroll, 2 different animation studios to fund. And it just got too much. So in the end, we had to fold. And the bank took those brands because they had first charge on them, and they sold them on the open market, and actually were bought by DreamWorks. So DreamWorks have those brands right now. And it'd be interesting to see what they do with them. But eventually,
you picked it up, sir. You picked it up, and you ran again. And obviously, we get to the future. But I have one question before we've got, maybe I've got 2 more before we perhaps invite someone else in to ask a question. And then I've noticed that on the chat, just so you know, there's an awful lot of questions coming in. Hopefully we get through some of those. And they're being chosen by the team at the moment. I don't know how they're going to do that, to be honest. I've had a quick look at what's coming through.
Okay.
I was going to say that many will be wondering how you continually come up with such incredible and much loved characters, you know, that literally span the world. And you've already touched on merchandising. There are questions later on. I'm sure other people will come up with those as well. But this is a question I'd love to ask you. What is it that surprises you about what children like or even dislike from the perspective of a grown man?
Well, first of all, I don't think my I've gotten older, but my brain has stayed the same. I kind of just stay young somehow. Maybe the trick is just to keep having kids. So maybe Mick Jagger's got it right. I don't know, but we just, you know, they keep you young, so you can keep coming up. You can see the world through their eyes and keep coming up with fresh ideas. It's always just been something that I've had. Every day I work. I don't think there's a day that I don't do something on one of the concepts or one of the projects I'm working on. There are quite a few. Even when I'm on holiday, I get told off. I sneak my laptop in my suitcase and sit around the pool, still taking Zoom calls on all these different projects, which doesn't go down well. But anyway, the thing is that it's just, you know, as a creator, I don't think creative people will ever do stop. I don't think, you know, Paul McCartney ever stops writing songs. He's probably still writing songs at home. I think you just do. You either you've got that type of brain, or you don't. And I've never got tired of it because I diversify it all the time. I'm not just doing preschool stuff. I'm doing movies now. I'm doing 6 to 10 comedy stuff. I'm doing books for teenagers, you know, live stage shows with music. So I'm just kind of doing anything that kind of bubbles up that sounds interesting.
So on that basis, Keith, you sort of jumped one question. I'm going to go to one of those, and I'm going to come back just a touch. Okay, but I understand you just mentioned that you're doing all sorts of other things now. I'm going to come back to the little bit about the kids side again, but I understand, and you might not be able to tell us anything because I understand that it's you know, it's always a difficult world in Hollywood, but I understand you might be working with a very, very well-known, let's call it massive, Hollywood star for a future release, I believe, later this year. Are you allowed to tell us?
Yeah, we can. It's been released. The press releases have happened. So this is a film called Ozzy, Ozi, which is this wonderful story about a young orangutan who saves her rainforest world from destruction through deforestation. So she is this teenager that is super smart and ends up learning how to use a computer in an orphanage when she's separated from her parents as a baby. And she ends up learning sign language and then moving into technology and learning how to communicate with the outside world using computers. And then she builds a following. She's an influencer. And then she finds out her parents are still alive out there. And so she goes out on this amazing journey with some animal friends, leaves the orphanage to find her parents and try to do something about the destruction that's going on all around her, you know, caused by palm oil and deforestation. So it's very topical and very powerful. It makes a great point, but it's done in a very entertaining way. It's very emotional. So you'll have to take lots of tissues to the cinema because you will be crying, but you'll be laughing as well because it's got a wonderful mix of characters. And we've got all these fabulous Hollywood A-lister stars as part of it. And the reason for that is because we managed to get Leonardo DiCaprio on board as a producer. And of course, with his name, then we were able to attract the money and the talent. So we finished the film. It took a long time to make. It was all animated over in Paris at the wonderful Micros Paris studios, using their animation guys in Bangalore in India. And they produced the most incredible film, directed by a good friend of mine, Tim Harper, award-winning director. We've got fabulous music, great score. We've got a fantastic theme tune written by Diane Warren, who's one of America's most iconic songwriters. She's had 14 nominations for Best Song, Oscar nominations for Best Song. She's never won, but she thinks this could be the one. And it's just this extraordinary film. And it's actually being launched this summer. I think it's coming out in August, end of August. Dates still to be completely confirmed, but it's they're currently signing up distribution all over the world. So
well, Keith, we've got to say congratulations in advance, and I'm sure that's going to be a massive hit. I was very worried there for a moment you weren't going to mention Leonardo DiCaprio, and I was going to be left hanging with the stars and the music greats like Diane Warren, of course. But you managed to get there.
Well, we've got Laura Dern plays the mother. We've got RuPaul plays one of the crocodile characters, and Jimon Honsu, the brilliant actor who's in Gladiator and Blood Diamond. The cast is great. You can Google it and see who we've got on board. Donald Sutherland plays the bad crocodile. So yeah, wonderful cast. So I hope everybody will go and see it. And the reason is because part of the profits are going to go towards an important charity. One of them is International Animal Rescue, who have got an orphanage out in Indonesia, in Sumatra or Borneo. I can't remember which one it was, but they rear and look after young babies who are separated, and they have to literally teach them how to fend for themselves, and they then rehabilitate them into the forest afterwards. So it's a great charity. So part of the money is going to go to them. So we really need it to be a success, and then we can bring out Aussie 2 and Aussie 3, because we've got an idea of to turn her into a big global brand, if you like, a sort of spokesperson for the animal world.
I thought you were going to give away the story there. Don't do that.
No.
I'm sure that everybody here, well, there's two things really on that story. The first one is, yes, we wish you every success, and hopefully we can do things for orangutans around the world. But there's now a whole pile of people expecting invites, of course, to the Leicester Square.
to the Leicester Square. Yeah, I thought it'd be really cool to do an orange carpet rather than a red carpet, to keep the theme going,
and a bit furry, maybe.
Yeah, furry. Yeah, it's got to be a bit of fur in there somewhere.
Okay, Keith, you've given us lots of information so far, and I've seen lots of information coming in, and people asking, looking for questions as well. I've got to find out what's been said to me independently, right? But before we get there, we do have one question that I need to ask you. Or rather one guest that's already in that has a question. And we have a gentleman with us who is in the music industry, a friend of ours, I believe. Of course he is. We know he is. And he's got a question. So David in the music room, because David's in the music room, he's in the gallery here today with us. perhaps we could bring in Ivo.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Thank you.
Hi, Ivo. Good to see you. How's it going in the music world, sir?
So far, everything good. It's moving quite good, I would say. I mean,
Fantastic.
I switched to children music a few years ago, so that's going very well.
Please ask your question of Keith, and Keith, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. So, Keith, my question is mainly because I'm like an established music producer, doing a lot of children music, created a lot of brands for children. Now we created a new brand, the Yoginis, that are 5 little animals, and they act as ambassadors for sustainability. So we're planning a series with them. And so my question to you is, when you get new ideas for new stories or new children brands, what are your main points? How do you judge if it could be a success or not? Is it more something?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can only go by my gut instinct. You've got to get through the gatekeepers. Obviously, they're the people who look after all the broadcasters, and they're the ones who decide which ones they're going to go with. And it's very, very tough at the moment, I have to tell you, getting stuff picked up. But the ones that are going to stand more chance are, of course, the ones where you fall in love with characters first and foremost. There's got to be something about the characters that you connect emotionally with, and you really care about them, and you care about their journey. So there has to be heart in the show, rather than just looking at it purely as a commercial exercise. There's got to be heart. And think about, would it make a great series of kids' books, for instance, reading them to your kids at night? Would it make a really nice sort of stage show with those characters? Can you see that? Can you see those toys on the shelf? What's the play pattern? How would they, what's going to make it interesting to a toy company or a production company to pick it up? If they're going to invest in this, then they've got to make their money back. So you just have to ask lots of questions about it, and make sure that you add those things into the show which tick all those boxes, so that you have those answers when people ask you those questions, and make it visually, as appealing as possible, to appeal to get. I mean, a picture tells 1,000 words, obviously. Sometimes I think on my Bob the Builder pitch, I think it was the image of actually Bob sitting in the bucket of the little JCB, actually, that sold it, because that just came across straight away, that summed the idea up. So sometimes you can put an image in that will really stop somebody, rather than just reams of words, which they have to wade through every day, thousands of them. So something's got to appeal to them and stand out. I think stand out is good. And always, you can never stop refining it and polishing it and making it better and better. Keep going over it until you're ready to show people. But make sure all those things, all those boxes are ticked before you start showing it around.
Yeah, that sounds good. So it's not a lot of testing and analyzing and AI. It's more your intuition, and you follow that.
I think so. Yeah, exactly. And try it on some kids. Actually, just show it to some kids. If you've got young kids, go take it to their class and show it, and ask questions and see which characters they like and which ones they don't. It's always good to get some sort of feedback, and it's amazing what some of the things that they come up with, that you hadn't thought of, and you think, oh wow, that's a brilliant idea, so they're very astute and clever, much smarter than we give them credit for. So they can help a lot.
Well, thank you very much. So thank you, Ivo, and thank you, Keith, for the answer. Now, Ivo, just if you've never met Ivo before, Ivo is very humble there, because if you actually find out who he is online, you'll find that he has rather a successful career as a music producer in Germany.
Oh, I'm gonna have a look.
Yeah, I would. I would. He's a successful young man. Right. I've got to tell you before we move on that I'm looking at this, and we had. I'm just trying to get them right now. I've been looking down the list while you were chatting there, and there was comments like. OMG, I remember every tune from all of those. And it was Kitty Lai, actually, who's got her own brands in the UK in other areas. And she says, I know the theme tunes to most, love Rah Rah the Noisy Lion. So there you go. It's almost like doing a radio show now. What I would like to say is that we also have Paul Woods-Turley here, who's a very dear friend of ours as well, looked after Red Bull, and GoPro, one of their guys, another one for the youngsters to perhaps connect with. Don't forget, of course, in the chat, put your LinkedIn. You never know who you're going to meet at a Nugget Live or with One Golden Nugget. It's what we do. We share the wisdom and we share our friends, and we get things hopefully done for you. We have Keely there. We have Brenda. We have Adam. Zika, I hope I get the names right. Don't want to do anything wrong with your name. Laurie Hamilton, Dominion, I think that says Manuel. We have Oluwasen. I hope I got that right. Many apologies if not. Roberto. Now there's a designer, a great guy, famous designer in his country. Many of these also authors in books. So I'm going to go over to our team. Sorry, Gautam. I don't want to miss anybody out here. Michelle, looking more. There we go. Those are the ones I've written in. So the team are going to drop in. I'm going to go to the library in the building right now, and a very special gentleman in One Golden Nugget, Stephen Foster. Stephen's going to tell me who we're actually going to bring in and which question has been chosen first. So over to you, Stephen.
I would prefer you introduce me as Keith's best friend.
Okay, sorry. So let's do this properly for the media students. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Keith's best friend.
No, me and Keith are good friends, aren't we, Keith? Aren't we, Keith?
We are. We definitely are.
First question, Laurie Hamilton. Let's. Do you want to come on and ask it, Laurie? You're asked to unmute if you're around. Here we go.
Yes. Hello. Hi.
Hi,
everyone. Thank you so much for including me. So, Keith, I've been a fan for a long time. I'm also a television and film writer, not to your level, but I aspire. And my question for you is, how do you keep ideas fresh when you're writing a long-term show? You know, because the challenge, of course, with any kind of children's show, you have to keep the world consistent, but then you also have to have fresh ideas. So I'm curious about your process for that.
well, once my job is really the catalyst of the idea. So I'm coming up with a spark of an idea, and so I write up what's called a treatment, which then becomes a Bible, you know, which shows and explains the world, the characters, the personalities, how it all works together, what sort of storylines we might get these characters going on. All that's kind of explained in the Bible. Once I get those ideas picked up from a production company, if I'm not producing it myself, I'll sell them into production companies, and let them take on this huge job to try and get it made into a TV show. So they take on the if you like, the financial burden of trying to, you know, move that forward on the development side, get the scripts written from experienced writers in that age group. I'm staying on board as a consultant all the way through, looking at their designs, looking at the scripts, and you know, the trick for me is to come up with something that actually gives lots and lots of storyline potential. So because what happens is on a 52 episodic series, 52 11 minutes, let's say, which is, I think, Paw Patrol, how I sold Paw Patrol in. You're going to have a team of about, I don't know, 6 or 7 or more script writers working under a head writer, like a showrunner, head writer, and he, with his team, have got to write those scripts, but they're kind of using the treatment of the Bible as their sort of the way forward, the rule book, if you like, of how you get from A to B to C and finish off the story up. But their creativity comes through on introducing new storylines, maybe new locations, and how they utilize the world that we've created, and what interesting things can they do within that world and the characters that have been created. Sometimes they can suggest new characters, but usually those are more done on specials or movies. But generally, it's the cast that we've created, and so you need an idea that's very adaptable and versatile, so you can get lots of stories out of. You should never be short of storyline ideas from a really good initial, what I call the big idea. Once you've got that, you can go anywhere with it, and you can keep on creating great storylines.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your question, Laurie. Thank you very much. And Keith, thanks for the answer. Now, just before we go any further, just quickly, there's one or two names that I obviously don't know because we've put this out for people to join. There's a few graphics designers out there. Obviously, David's part of our team, and you know him well, Keith. But there's one or two, I think, people here that perhaps we can get a couple of questions in from the graphics side, because you were drawing and you were doing that. How much before they come in and we choose one, how much input do you have to the actual look of the character, or is it just the style of the character that you do?
So in the early days, I would do quite a lot of drawing. On the Bob pitch, I did lots and lots of different character design. And then, of course, once you sell it to a production company, they then, because what you're doing is assigning the rights to them 100%, so they are in control. They use me as a consultant, but of course, they've got final say on creative direction, and they pay the bill. So they decide, hopefully with me helping, which designers or which animation studios they're going to use. And then, of course, they can use my sketches or doodles as to start them off, but usually you've got these incredibly talented teams of people who are more than capable of creating these characters. So I like to think that my stuff instigates or inspires them to then start the creative process. And I will stay on board usually up until the end of series 1, maybe 52 episodes. And then it's a discussion whether I stay on board beyond that. Because the fact is that you have so many people involved during the production of a show. You've got script editors, you've got the broadcasters making creative comments, you've got the animation company making comments, you've got the producers who are overseeing it, you've got the everybody is making comments to everything. So I think the last thing they want is yet more comments from the creator. They kind of wish that I'd just go away by this time, because they've got what they want and they're off.
Can I ask you a question there, Keith? Sorry, just to be blunt on that then. At the end of 52, you're probably, as a creator, you're probably looking to do the new thing anyway, because you've already signed your deal. You're going to get
that's exactly. I'm not somebody that likes to stay around years and years and years working on just one thing. I'm already moving on to the next thing. To be honest, all the shows that I've currently got, I've got several in development with several production companies around the world. And I like flitting between them and sort of moving them forward bit by bit. And if we get one away, that's great. I can stay on board and see it through at least to the end of the first series. But then, as I say, they might, once that happens, they're perfectly comfortable. They've got the story arc, they've got the characters, and they're perfectly capable of just going off and moving that forward. They don't really need me around. So I can then move on to my next thing. And for me, it's all about coming up with the ideas anyway. That's my That's my biggest thing.
That's your genius for sure. I'm hoping Marcus can give us a thumbs up, because Marcus Phoenix is on there and he asked me the question, how do you structure and plan your pitch to buyers? Well, obviously, I think you've covered that when you answered Larry.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, every single job is different. I mean, I don't think there's ever been one deal that I've done that's been the same. You can sell a concept in with just a treatment. And other times you can spend fortunes on getting this most amazing Bible, and you can have animation trailers made. You can have even little toy prototypes made to get out and show them on the table. Everybody does it their own way, but you can sell it in if the idea is outstanding, that you can get some interest on, where you don't have to spend quite so much and produce quite so much. But you need the key things that you've got to get the idea over. You've got to make them fall in love with your characters. One or two designs is good. Animation trailer, that's expensive, so you could take it in early days and just see what sort of reaction you get. They might then say, well, I'd need to see this as a style. I want to see an animation test. Well, then you've got some interest, so it's kind of worth going the extra mile. But all this has got to be paid for, so everybody has got to somehow. That's another journey, not just the creative journey, but you've got the financial journey as well, which is how do we fund this?
So, Keith,
Sure.
Sorry. So just out of interest then, for those people, because what we do is, how long, just before we go to this question, how long have you got? Can you spend a little bit more time with us?
Yeah, sure.
Excellent. So what we do is I'll get the team behind the scenes there at the moment, just to pick out some of these questions. We'd like to get some of these guys in that perhaps have never been to Nugget Live before, to ask you a few questions, and we'll keep them relatively short. They'll come and ask the question. I'll say goodbye pretty much for them. So you finish the question, we'll move on. But
sure.
The question is this. You just mentioned that sometimes it's worth spending money. I mean, you're going to tell me no instantly, but what would be, say, from time spent, necessary money spent, doing your Bible, as you call it, like a deck for a business, whatever. What would you say is the minimum that you'd expect to spend to have a hit like you've had? To get
it away, yeah. I mean, well, if we ignore the hours spent, because that's incalculable. I mean, I'm just talking about Aussie for a minute. That took me 14 years to get made. If I added up all the hours I spent on that would be more than a Disney movie, I suppose. But if you talk about actual money that you're spending, that you've got to recoup, then I suppose to get it just picked up by a broadcaster, you can do it. I've done some Bibles recently that I'm using a bit of AI. People using a little bit more AI to try and get there quicker, and that's usually about $5,000, $6,000 just for a basic sort of a treatment, a small Bible. And then, of course, you probably want a script. You've got to get a script written. That's going to cost you money unless you can write scripts yourself. And you would just have to negotiate with an agent, a writer's agent for that. But once you've got those, you've got enough to kind of start showing people. When you move on to animation tests, again, animation companies themselves can do that in-house, obviously at cost, so it's a lot cheaper. But if you were going to them and you were commissioning them to do something, you'd probably be able to get a small animation trailer done, and depending on how long it is and the sophistication of the animation, but anywhere between sort of 10, 15 up to, we've spent up to $100,000 on an animation test. So again, there's no real set fee. It depends a lot on the style, what you're trying to achieve, if you're doing stop frame, you've got to make the puppets, you've got to make the models, you know, you've got to show that. And it's a lot more expensive. Or if it's 2D, simple color, you know, flat color, you could do that a lot cheaper. But every job is different. So I wouldn't really like to put a complete figure on it, but I think you could probably get in and pitch it. You should be able to start pitching stuff on basic stuff on without a trailer for under 10 grand.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, there's one or two people bound to be getting excited now. You mentioned 2D. There's someone up there with 2D against their name. So I'm going to go back to the library in the Nugget Mansion, and I'm going to go back to Steve and say, Steve, you must have selected some for me by now. What are we going to do next?
Two more questions. Kitty, she's got a great question. Do you want to come up, Kitty?
Okay. Hi, Keith. How are you?
Hi, Kitty.
Oh, thank you so much for creating all these amazing shows. My son loved all of them. My nephew loved Bob the Builder. He's a bit older, but Paw Patrol, Rah Rah, and all the other shows that you've created, I just just had to sit through them. But I love them. I love the kids show. But my question is, as a creative myself, and I love the way, you know, you go for brainstorms and come up with all these lovely creative ideas. But there's a time when you get designer block. So what have you ever had designer's block, and how have you overcome them?
No, you know, Kitty, I haven't. The trouble, I have too many ideas. I literally, I have to write them down. What I tend to do is I kind of write them down in a little notebook, park them, put them away in my files, and then go back through when I'm sitting there thinking, right, what's the next thing? And then I look, if there is a golden nugget, if you like, amongst those ideas, if there's something that really stands out, then I start working on it and sort of moving it forward to see if it actually does work. I soon get to a point that, is this actually going to be interesting enough story-wise? That's the first thing. Are people going to really love these characters? Can I imagine it in my head on television? Is a broadcaster going to find it interesting? Is a toy company going to find it interesting? And I start then losing those ideas, if you like, and then moving on to the stronger ones. But I'm always bubbling and coming up with new stuff. I think I've got enough to last me till I'm about 160. So if I'll keep going anyway and get as many out as possible.
Amazing.
Wow.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kitty.
Thanks.
Just a quick one while Steve's pulling up the next one for us. It's a question I really wanted to get in earlier that we then moved on from, and I didn't go back to. The world has changed, and there's no doubt about that. That what was able to be said or done in past was one thing, and perhaps the relationships that were had even in, for example, Thunderbirds in your childhood. What are the changes and challenges now for you in the modern world and social media, and what they would say about your characters?
Well, you know, obviously times have changed a lot. There's many more places that a show can appear in, all different formats, longer formats and short formats now on YouTube, and all these, you know, streaming companies, and kids are watching content on their phones and on their screens, on their laptops, in all sorts of ways. So I think nowadays an idea is, it has to work in all those different in those different areas for kids. And so for me, I kind of feel, I just concentrate on the idea. Is the idea a really good one? I don't tend to think too much about the technology side and how it's going to appear in short form, although you do have to consider that, especially nowadays with the budgets that you're making a TV show. It's a good idea to sort of try and raise a little bit more to try and make maybe a game to go alongside it, or some shorts to go on YouTube. I mean, that's the way people are going. It obviously just makes it more expensive, and you know, all these different places that you've got to try and fit the content into. But that will come naturally anyway on a successful show. If a show is successful, and a good example is Bluey, that's come out of Australia, which is a huge success recently. It started this brilliant little 2D animated show, picking up loads of awards. Kids love it, parents love it, and that has just exploded. Now that's everywhere because success generates that. They've got stage shows, and they've got it, musicals, and they've got it everywhere. It's like an ambassador now for New South Wales. I read somewhere that is brilliant. So I think that if you have success, it naturally will go into those areas. It just will. Success generates that.
Okay, thank you very much, Keith. Now, Steve will come back in just a second from the library there with our next question. One question that we never really touched on, I did have as other questions, and we've nudged into it a little bit, and that is the power of the merchandise when you make characters like you've done, and what that can generate around the world. But before we go there, in case this question is about that, and I don't know just yet, we're going to go back to the library and Steve. And Steve, who's up next?
Last question. Paul Woods Turley, you're there, mate. Can you ask that question about legacy that you posted about? I'll just bring you up 1 second. That's the last question, Max.
Yep.
Hey there. Hi, Keith. Thanks for that, Stephen, and thanks, Maxwell. Yeah, basically, you've mentioned. Hi, Keith. You've mentioned you've got older children. I think you said 3 sons. You've got your young daughter. Have any of those shown an interest in continuing your legacy? You say you've got ideas until you're 160. Is there a safety box within one of those families that can carry this forward?
They're all creative in their own ways. Actually, it's weird that they've all taken one aspect of my creative life and are currently doing that particular thing. One is an entrepreneur, created his own characters and created a clothing brand. So he's taken characters and done a spin-off clothing brand from those characters, and is doing great guns. It's fantastic. Won loads of awards and opening shops up left, right, and centre in London. So that's great to see. And then the second one is in advertising, which is obviously where I started. And the third one is a fine artist doing painting, which is what I did as well at art college. But I didn't go the fine art route. I went the more commercial route. But it's great he's the proper artist, if you like. He's the one that we kind of all wish we could be like. But it's all feast and famine with fine artists, as you can imagine. So I'm having to help him out. But he's a talent, and hopefully he's gonna crack it. And Daisy, yeah, she's just very creative on more theatrical side. So she's a dancer. She loves dancing, ballet, jazz, any type of dancing or performing in front of people. So, and that's not actually an area that I did, but her mum did that. So she's picking up on the mum's genes, I think.
That's great. So the Chapman name will continue for decades to come.
Well, I hope so. But they do. I mean, they can last forever. These. If you look at some of the biggest brands in the world, Pokemon, I think, is the biggest. It's up to 140 billion global. I think he's getting on a bit now. I think he started in Japan. I mean, Mickey Mouse and Winnie the Pooh must be 90, 100 years old now. And Bob the Builder's just passed actually 25 years, which really shocked me the other day, just thinking, oh my God, Bob is 25 years old this year. And Paw Patrol is suddenly 11 years old. It's just happened so quickly. So they can become, evergreens. If you're lucky enough, if you have that little bit of good luck with your characters, they can go on and keep refreshing themselves and become evergreens.
Well, thank you very much, Paul, and Keith. I'm getting a message in my ear here saying that we should. It's time to not ask Keith any more questions, but maybe another time we can go to merchandising. Unless you want to say something about merchandising and the power of it to change your life.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, the merchandising, the licensing and merchandising is the big thing that every creator needs to make sure that he negotiates that one thing in their contract. If they're assigning their rights to their IP, they've got to get that. It's all important because, of course, if it does, you always must imagine that your idea is going to take off and it's going to be global, because it just might. It's rare to get that, but of course it could happen, in which case you've got to have a really good deal to make sure that you're sharing in that profit, and it's not just a production company that's taking all the profits, and they can be huge. I mean, it's huge business. I think Paw Patrol must be now over 16 billion. I mean, which is huge if you think about it. I think if you Google the Beatles have done something like 6 billion on their record sales, and Queen, and I mean, if you add them all up, they don't come to Paw Patrol just as one brand. It's quite extraordinary, and that's a great achievement. But that's all down to Spin Master Entertainment, who picked the idea up and ran with it and made a good idea into a great idea. So they deserve all that amazing success. And it costs millions for them to invest. So they're really taking a big risk to do that in the first place. So they deserve all that success. But I like it because it kind of feels that I've created a lot of jobs out of it globally. It's quite cool to think that you've created all those jobs out of those characters in all those thousands of products around the world in different countries. We're all watching that show, all dubbed in those different languages, and factories all over the world making products based on those characters. So that's creating quite a lot of jobs, and becoming huge brands, meaningful brands.
Well, I've got to say, Keith, so even if I just took Hey Jude and Bohemian Rhapsody, let alone the rest of the catalogue, yours combined, those two massive hits, yours combined, let's call it Paw Patrol, but there's many more, of course, in the basket to come, and those you've done before. Can I say, on behalf of everybody who is here with us today, thank you so much. What an insight. You've given us plenty of information, a nice background story as well. It's not the end of this story. People can find you on our Success, Survive and Thrive podcast, of course, with the founder of Reebok. You're also a co-author in one of the Survive and Thrive books as well. Ladies and gentlemen, you've written down your details, hopefully, in the chat, and no doubt we'll be getting in contact with you at some point. It's been an absolute pleasure. Keith, before we go, is there a question I should have asked you that I didn't, that you wish to be asked, and tell everybody? Is there something we've missed that you just want to let everybody know that's here with us today?
Well, it'd be a good opportunity for me to mention, I should, because otherwise I'll get in trouble for it, a project that I'm working on to try and get teenagers reading again. Teenage boys especially, who spend too much time on their computers. I try and get them reading adventure thrillers again. So I sort of teamed up with the Wilbur Smith family, who's the big famous adventure writer, and written with my brilliant co-writer Steve Cole, a trilogy of books to get kids reading again, called Prey Zone, Prey Zone, as a trilogy of adventure books. And the last one is actually published this September with Bonnier Books, and that's been a great experience, sort of, coming up with something completely out of my comfort zone, if you like, to try and get boys back into reading. So I used to love reading books. Back in the day, we didn't have computers and phones, so reading, we spent a lot more time reading perhaps, but it would be great if kids could get back into sort of reading and getting their imaginations going, not just on computer games.
So Keith, is that project purely within you and the Wilbur Smith family?
Yes, yeah, that's through Bonnier Books, the publishers of the Wilbur Smith books. Prey Zone has been a trilogy of books, one continuous story arc set in South Africa with amazing story concept, and hopefully one day it will be a Netflix series, because it ought to be. It's got that kind of big filmic idea to it. So if anybody's got teenage boys, try and look those up.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, if anyone can make it happen, sir, it's definitely you. If we get a chance to put out, or perhaps you could send us just some details that we might need, we can help possibly push some of those out across our network. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how many of you are still there at the moment, but please put your hands together. What a masterclass that has been from a man who truly has made a difference.
Guys. Thank you,
Keith. It's been an absolute pleasure. I don't know if Steve wants to come and say anything at the end, just to say thank you very much, because as a team, it's been brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Max. Thanks for your time. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I just want to say I'm so grateful that you are my best friend, and and let's hang out very soon. You're a legend. Yes. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Steve, and say hi to Joe and everybody, and thanks for everybody for listening in. It's been really good.
Take care, ladies and gentlemen. We wish you a very good rest of your day. From One Golden Nugget, Keith Chapman and the team here, thank you very much for joining us. Until next time on Nugget Live, goodbye.